Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Continuing in Mukhtasar Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Qur'an of An-Nawawi, he says here now, it is not allowed to read Qur'an with the non-Arabic tongue, al-Ajamiyya, whether he is proficient in Arabic or not, whether it's in prayer or outside of it. If he reads it in his prayer is invalid, if you read in other than the Arabic language. This is the madhab of Imam Malik, Al-Shafi'i, Ahmed and Dawood. Abu Hanifa though permitted it, and his two companions Abu Yusuf and Muhammad permitted it for the one who does not know the Arabic language. So this chapter is talking about reading the Qur'an in other than the Arabic language. And he's mentioning here that it's not permissible to do so inside or outside the prayer. You cannot read the Qur'an outside in the non-Arabic language. Now, a person may ask, then what about transliterations? Because transliterations, what they do is they write it in the English language to represent how to pronounce in a different language. So here, Shaykh Sulaiman Ruhaili, he mentions here, he was asked about the transliterations of the Qur'an with English letters for the one who does not know the Arabic language. He says the origin is that it is not permissible for the Qur'an to be written in other than the Arabic language and in other than the script it has come in. It is also not allowed to write in other than the Arabic, nor in representation other than that which has come in, except if that is clear in the recitation. If it is needed to write with other than the Arabic letters to teach new Muslims who do not know Arabic and are not able to articulate it, then he says, I see it that is permissible with two conditions to transliterate. Number one condition, that it be done out of necessity, whereas you need this. What part of the Qur'an is obligatory for you to learn? Fatiha. Fatiha is the only. ثُمَّ اقْرَأْ بِمَا تَيَسَّرَ مَعَكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Right? Read after that which is easy for you to read the Qur'an. لَا صَلَاةَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَقْرَأْ بِفَاتِحَةِ الْكِتَابِ. No salah for those who do not read Fatiha Kitab. So he's saying here, if there's a necessity for something, then he says it is only for Fatiha. You could do transliteration for Fatiha because Fatiha is obligatory for a Muslim to read in the prayer. And the second condition is that this writing be not firm. Whereas, for example, he says you write on the board and once you're done teaching them, you erase it. You erase it and like this. Now he says here, as for writing books in the English language for memorization for the new Muslims and writing a number of surahs in the English letters, then this is not permissible. This is transliteration, not permissible to do so with the Qur'an because they may enter into something later on. So this is something that a person should stay away from, transliteration, when it comes to teaching new Muslims Qur'an. Rather, the Qur'an is taken by mouth to mouth, in a sense that you read, you recite, and he hears it from you, and then he recites it from face to face. So a person should try to teach a new Muslim by way of reciting the Qur'an to him and him repeating after him, not by way of these transliterations. But he does mention here though, that if a person is in need of writing it down for this individual who's new to Islam, until he learns Fatiha and learns his prayer properly, and then he gets rid of it after when he's done. Once the necessity is gone, it should be done with, right? It should be put away. Similarly, I asked Shaykh Abdul Hamid about this, and he told me that the Ahnaf, as Imam Nawawi mentions, they permit it with the conditions that there be necessity. But he says, Al-Ahwat, what is safer is you don't get into this chapter. What is safer is you don't enter into the chapter of transliterations, and rather you teach in different ways. Also, another question may arise, what about translating the Qur'an? The translating the Qur'an is allowed. Transliteration is not allowed, except in necessity, as mentioned by Shaykh Sulaiman Ruhaili and other scholars. But when it comes to translation, then that is allowed. Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah mentioned it's permissible due to the dire need for it, also because there's nothing in the legislative evidences that prevents translating the Qur'an. And that this is from the means of relying from Allah and His Messenger, and that is the command with legislation. For example, he mentioned there was one Sahabi, the Prophet told him to go and learn the Jewish language, to translate the books to him. Who was that Sahabi? You know the Sahabi's name that the Prophet told him to go learn the Jewish language? He learned in 17 days. Zayd ibn Thabit, radiallahu anhu. Showing us here that it's allowed to translate the Qur'an, but not by way of wordings, but by way of meaning. You translate the meaning of the Qur'an. You translate the meaning of the Qur'an. As for reciting the Qur'an in other than the Arabic language in the Salat, then the Salat doesn't count. For Allah says, Qur'anan Arabiyan. We send the Qur'an as the Arabic book. Also, bilisanin Arabiyyin mubin, with a clear Arabic tongue. Ibn Qudamah, he mentions, the Qur'an is a mu'jizah. It is a miracle. Its wording and its meanings. So if it is changed and is taken away from its representation or its script, then it's not considered Qur'an. It's not considered Qur'an and nothing similar to it. Rather, you could do tafsir of it, explanation of it. So here it's not allowed to recite the Qur'an other than the Arabic language or write the transliteration like this. Rather, a person should stick to the Arabic language, the way Allah sent down the Qur'an, and try to teach the people by them learning the Arabic language. Then he says it is allowed to read the Qur'an with the 7 well-known qira'at, which have been agreed upon. It is not allowed to read with other than the 7, nor with irregular reports which have been reported from the 7 qurra. If he reads it in his prayer is not correct if he is knowledgeable, and if he is ignorant, then his prayer is not invalid. If he starts reading the Qur'an with one recitation from the 7, he should continue as long as the speech is connected to each other. If the connection ends, he can read another recitation. That's for the qira'at. Then the scholars have mentioned there's 3 conditions for a qira'at to be considered sahih. Number 1, that it be in accordance with the Arabic language in any angle. Ibn al-Jazari mentioned, what does that mean? That it has to be in the accordance with the Arabic grammar rules. So the qira'ah has to be in accordance to the Arabic grammar rules. Number 2, it must be in agreement to the Uthmani script. Rasm al-Uthmani. It must be in agreement to the Uthmani script. So number 1, it must be in accordance to the Arabic language. Number 2, in accordance to the Uthmani script. And number 3, it must be authentically reported to the Prophet ﷺ. It must be authentically reported to the Prophet ﷺ. If these 3 conditions are met, then it shows that it is from the speech of Allah, and a Qur'an that the Prophet recited, and a Qur'an which is preserved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these 7 qira'at are all from Allah. They're all the speech of Allah. They're all preserved by Allah. And they are qira'at or recitation that the Prophet recited. That the Prophet ﷺ recited. Now these 7 types of recitation which are related, we'll mention them, just so we become aware of them. Because you hear sometimes someone says, he has 10 qira'at memorized. And you ask him what are the 10 qira'at, he doesn't know any of them. He doesn't know where they came from, who he's talking about, but as long as he has 10 qira'at, and he's become famous now. The first one, Nafi', we'll mention Nafi', the reciter of Medina. They say Nafi' took the Qur'an from around 70 tabi'in. 70 tabi'un. And from Nafi' is reported from Nafi', Qalun and Warsh. Qalun and Warsh, they took Qur'an from Nafi'. So Nafi' is the first one. The second one is Ibn Kathir. Not Hafid Ibn Kathir, the one who wrote the tafsir, but Ibn Kathir in the time of the Tabi'in. Ibn Kathir, the reciter of Mecca. From him, Al-Bazzi and Qunbul took it. From him, Al-Bazzi and Qunbul. They took the recitation. The third one is Abu Amr al-Basri. From him, Ad-Dawri and As-Susi took it. Ad-Dawri and As-Susi. So we have Nafi', from him took it, Qalun and Warsh. Ibn Kathir, from him Al-Bazzi and Qunbul. Abu Amr al-Basri is the third one. From him Ad-Dawri and As-Susi. And the fourth one is Ibn Amir al-Dimishqi. Ibn Amir al-Dimishqi. From him Hisham and Ibn Dhaqwan. Hisham and Ibn Dhaqwan, they took it from him. The fourth one, or the fifth one, is Asim. Asim Abi al-Najud. From him Shu'bah and Hafs took it. Shu'bah and Hafs. Someone asks you what recitation you recite with. What is your reply? What's majority of us, who do we recite from? Hafs and Asim. This is where it came from, Hafs and Asim. So Hafs, he took it from Asim, and this is what majority of us recite with our recitation, Hafs and Asim. The next one is Hamza. From him Khalaf and Khallad, they took it. And the last one, Al-Kisa'i. And from him Abu al-Harith and Hafs ad-Dawri, they took. These are the 7 qira'at, and these are mutawatir. What does it mean mutawatir? We discussed science of hadith. What is mutawatir? What's mutawatir? You don't come to a class and study something and then months later you forgot everything about it. What does mutawatir mean? Nor are you shy. You shouldn't have khajal, kind of cowardice when you are asked a question, no one answers. Yes, Hamza, what's mutawatir? Reported by so many narrators, they call it mass transmission. So many people narrated it that there's no way it could be a lie. You have 1,000 people, 700, 600, 500 people saying they heard it like this, it can't be a lie. There's no way, there's no possible way it could be a lie. That's mutawatir. So these 7 come by way of tawatur. They're mutawatir. Someone say, where you get Qur'an? From hundreds of people. Hundreds of people relate like this. And then from time, millions. They related like this. Now, these are the 7, and they're mutawatir. There's 3 more that the scholars mentioned to complete the 10. And they're Abu Ja'far Yazid. The second one is Ya'qub al-Basri. And the third one is Khalaf ibn Hisham. So Abu Ja'far Yazid, Ya'qub al-Basri, and Khalaf ibn Hisham. Now these 3, the scholars differ. They're mutawatir as well. Some of them, they said no. The correct stance is they're also mutawatir. The correct stance is they're all mutawatir. From them who mentioned Ibn al-Jazari. They mentioned that these three are also mutawatir. So we have 10 mutawatir recitations that are agreed upon. Most of the 7 are agreed upon in scholars. These three, some of them agreed to as well. They're mutawatir. Now, as for reading outside of these 10, is what he's talking about, which is known as shadh recitation. And it's important to know these things. Why? Because someone's going to come to you from the Orientals and argue with you about these affairs. Us as students have to understand these affairs. We're not talking to people that don't study knowledge. You guys are students that come to the masajid and take notes and study and go to different classes. We have to know these things. The students must understand these kind of affairs. That's why we're going over it. For that reason, Shaykh Al-Uthaymin mentioned not to mention this amongst the awam, but to the students, it's allowed to mention this to the students. So there is some reports or recitation which is known as shadh, irregular reports, irregular recitations that oppose the Uthmani script, but they're in agreement to the Arabic language and their chain is authentic. From them is like Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh. He used to recite وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَقَطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا جَزَاءً مِمَّا كَسَبَ نَكَالًا مِنَ اللَّهِ. Instead of أَيْدِيَهُمَا, he used to recite أَيْمَانُهُمَا. أَيْمَانُهُمَا, their two right hands. وَقِرَاءَةُ أيضا, also him, when he said فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةُ أَيَّامٍ, he used to add مُتَتَابِعَات. This kind of recitation, is it allowed to recite it? Some of the scholars say no, because it opposes Uthman script. It opposes Uthman script. Other scholars, like Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn al-Qayyim, and other scholars, they say it's allowed because if it is authentic reported to the Prophet ﷺ, then we can recite with it. But that you shouldn't do it in front of people that don't understand. And what is their evidence for that? Who is one of the Sahabi that the Prophet said take Qur'an from? Ibn Mas'ud. If Ibn Mas'ud, his Qur'an wasn't to that level, the Prophet never said take Qur'an from him. But because he said take Qur'an from Ibn Mas'ud, if the recitation is authentic to him, then he is ahl, he is a person deserving of that right that his qira'ah is accepted. And this is a strong evidence that they mention. For that reason, Shaykh Al-Uthaymin mentioned the most correct statement is that if a recitation is authentic from the companion who read it, then it is raised to the Prophet ﷺ, and thus is an evidence it is allowed to read it outside of the prayer and inside, because it has been authentically connected to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wassalam. And this also stance of Ash-Shawkani and Imam Muqbil. Now, some of the scholars, they don't call the recitation shadh. Just as a benefit, you might come in some books, they call this kind of recitation ahad and not shadh. They call shadh a narration, a recitation which has no authenticity to it. Understand? Even in the science of hadith, what does shadh mean? What does shadh mean in the science of hadith? مُخَالَفَةُ الْمَقْبُولِ لِمَنْ هُوَ أَوْلَى مِنْ. Someone, a trustworthy narrator, opposing those who are more trusted in them. And it is a sign of authenticity or weakness. Shadh is weak. And so in some in the science of Qur'an, they'll say to you, a shadh recitation is a weak recitation. That has no authenticity to it. And they'll mention like the recitation of Ibn Mas'ud as ahad. Meaning it doesn't come from route of tawatur. Now someone may mention, if we could mention amongst common folk, Shaykh Uthaymin mentioned, should not be read with in front of the common folk because it will cause fitna and a disturbance. Whereas it might cause a person to not be comfortable with the recitation of the Qur'an and as such. Rather, it should be mentioned amongst the students. And as I said, most of us, the brothers here, they're students. You should have some kind of respect of yourself that you're a student. You come to the classes, you're a student. You should try to learn as much as you can. Don't belittle yourself. لا تحقرن من المعروف شيئا. Do not look down upon any kind of khair. You're coming to the classes, make your attention correct, and you become a student. So now you have to increase. Don't go backwards. Some brothers, they keep going backwards. They've studied a book, they want to go back to that book. They study again, they want to go back to it. This is going backwards. The student doesn't go backward, he goes forward. He reads one book, the second book is a higher level, the third book is a higher level, the fourth book is higher, and he continues like that. But some students, unfortunately, they keep going backwards and never benefit. 10 years goes down the line, he's still stuck on the same book. And this is not right. Now, did it occur in the time of the Prophet, I said, or we mentioned that? Why is there different recitations? Shaykh ibn Baz was asked, and we'll finish with this point. It has been affirmed from the Prophet that the Qur'an came down from Allah upon 7 ahruf. 7 different ahruf. And ahruf, the scholars differ regarding what it means. But Shaykh ibn Baz stances, meaning languages from the language of the Arabs and their dialects. To make recitation easy on them and a mercy from Allah for them. That I was relayed by Mutawatir, and the Riyat al-Qur'an confirms that. And that which is found from different recitation, then all of them has come down from the wise and praiseworthy one. First and foremost, we believe Allah is what? Al-Hakim and Alim. No one says to Allah, why did you do this and why you did that? Allah does what He wants. لا يسأل أما يفعل وهم يسألون. Allah is not asked about that which He does, rather we're going to be asked. No one says, why is there 7 recitation, why is 10? We don't do that. That's bad adab with Allah. That's bad manners with Allah. Allah is Al-Hakim, Al-Alim. We say this is the wisdom of Allah and it necessitated that. But He mentions here, it being enumerated or enumerated in recitation is not from distortion or change, nor confusion in its meanings, nor contradiction. In its intent, rather it confirms one another and clarifies one another. Some of the meanings of different recitation different, that benefits us a ruling and a realization of intent from the intent of legislation. So there's wisdoms behind it. From those wisdoms, the scholars mentioned that it makes it easy upon the ummah. One, it makes it easy upon the ummah that they can recite with these different qira'at. Some cannot pronounce a certain letter a certain way, so the qira'ah makes it easy for them. The qira'ah makes it easy for them to pronounce it the way that their qira'ah has come. This is ease for the ummah. Number two, it shows the virtue of this ummah, that it comes in different qira'at. That Allah has made it easy for the ummah, but when the nation before us, they only have one way to recite their book. Only one way to recite it. This shows sharaf, honor for the ummah of Islam, of the Muslimin. Showing number 3, it shows the secret of Allah for this book and His protection. That even when it's different recitations, Allah has protected all of it. Allah has protected all of the recitations, showing the preservation of Allah for this book. That with all of these different recitations, the kuffar couldn't come and distort any of it. And they couldn't come and put hands into it. Rather, Allah preserved it. This shows the secret of Allah regarding this book. And the next one that they mentioned is summarization. Whereas one word can represent different meanings. For example, Allah mentioned in the Qur'an, Surah Ma'idah, about wudu. Allah mentions, إِذَا كُنْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. That if you're going to stand up for the prayer, and you want to make wudu, then إِذَا كُنْتُمْ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, wash your faces, and then your hands, then wipe your head, and then wash your feet. In some qira'at it comes وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ. If you read وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ, you're saying what? You wash your feet. وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ, it means you can wipe over your socks. Showing us that a word, instead of making a whole verse to represent that, Allah summarized it with one word. This shows summarization of these different qira'ats. And also some qira'at clarify different qira'ats meanings and different words. And like this, for example, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا إِنْ جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. If a fasiq comes to you with news, clarify it. Another qira'at, فَتَثَبَّتُوا. Affirm it. So sometimes the qira'at clarify one another. And this is from the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and has benefits. And if a person truly ponders over it, he'll understand the benefits of this. We'll stop with this much and continue next week. And our brother face to his class. Subhanahu wa ta'ala.